I have two older brothers. My oldest brother, Brian, is about 9 years older than me. And then my middle brother, Zachary, is about 18 months older than me. My oldest brother, Brian, and he was, almost 10 years older than me. And so growing up, whenever we went on family vacations, Brian never really went with us.
But the summer of 2005 was different. Zachary decided to stay home, and 25-year-old Brian and his very pregnant wife joined 16-year-old Craig and their parents in Cape San Blas, Florida, about an hour south of Panama City in the Florida Panhandle.
We had never been to this place before, but I remember when we got there, it was not a touristy town. The place we were staying at had, a couple fishing poles, and maybe a couple floaties, and that was pretty much it. So I think on the first couple of days, we went to the bait shop that was in town, and then we got the bait that we were going to plan on fishing with, which was frozen shrimp.
On Monday, June 27th, 2005, their third day there, the weather wasn't great. It was windy and overcast, but the boys were happy to spend their day fishing again.
I would say 40 or 50 feet out from the shore was a sandbar. Before you got to the sandbar, they kind of dipped down into a little gully, which on me, I'm at the time I was probably 6'1", and it would get up to my neck, which when you're standing on the sandbar is probably only a foot or a foot and a half deep. And so we would, drop down and then stand up on the sandbar and cast out. We had no idea what we were fishing for by any means. But we did that for a few times, and then Brian caught one that was like a foot and a half long, and I'm a pretty competitive person, and so that just really upset me even more. So I was, wanting to go back out there immediately. And so we rebaited and while we were walking out, Brian is about 10 or 15 feet to my right. We're getting into the gully. And so for me, the water was probably right above my belly button. And the water's murky. You stick your hand in the water and it's only half a foot before it disappears. And so out of the blue, something just comes up and just kind of punches me in my left leg, just on the thigh, just a punch. And I didn't see anything. So I get this hit on my left thigh and I immediately just jump back and I yell, "What was that?" Something hit me on my left leg and then something grabbed me on my right leg and took me underwater immediately.
This is Live to Tell, the podcast where I talk to some of the bravest people who have been through the most horrifying things and lived to tell the tale. I'm Caitlin Van Mall.
What I remember was closing my eyes and telling myself, "Craig, this is a dream. You need to wake up right now." Simultaneously occurring at that time was this sensation of intense shaking pressure, that it was just kind of a whole body, not necessarily numbing feeling, but almost like an intense vibration, like pressure. But I'm telling myself, "Hey, Craig, this is a dream. You need to wake up." Brian to my right was able to actually see the fin of the shark flip up when it took me underwater. And so he immediately knew what it was.
It wasn't just a shark. It was a bull shark, a very aggressive species that hangs out in murky, shallow waters.
And then that seemed like it was a couple seconds long. And then that's when I, came up out of the water. I make eye contact with my brother, which is, 10 feet to my right. Now, what Brian describes is the shark essentially started dragging me out towards the ocean, but in the direction of Brian. And so I started coming out, and then Brian basically just swam and cut us off. And during this time, he's swinging the fishing pole, and it breaks, and that goes away. But Brian's a lifeguard, grabs me under my arm. During this time, I'm screaming bloody murder. All I see is just bright red, bubbly water right under me. I don't see anything. I still don't know what it is. At one point while we were doing this, for whatever reason, I thought it was a good idea that I need to get whatever this is off of me.
Bull sharks have rows of sharp, needle-like teeth in their bottom jaw and wide, triangular, still very sharp, teeth on the top.
And so I just take my hands and put my hands under the water, and it's not just half a second later, I bring my hands up and I look at both my hands and they're just completely, shredded open.
Because it's not registering yet that it's a shark.
No.
It's just a thing, a force.
It's something that's causing this.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, I put my hands under and I bring them up and they're shredded open, but they're not bleeding. It's just like clear flesh, which is really weird. Again, I'm 16 years old. I don't know anything about anatomy or biology, whatever. But so that's weird. I'm still feeling this intense kind of pressure. And so we get to a couple feet of water. My dad and another guy at this point, they run out to the water, grab me by my arm. A crowd is gathering because they're hearing me scream in the ocean. The shark is still on me at this point. So what had happened was it essentially was just like biting up and down on my leg and not necessarily pulling against us. And so it was just like kind of swimming along with us for the ride.
And just like gnawing on you.
Yep. And so by the time we got to 2 feet of water, like Brian sees the head of the shark in the water and punches it a few times and it lets go and it swims away, and that's history for the shark. And so, Brian's exhausted now. Something I have just a vivid memory of that day. I do remember Brian is just on his hands and knees, in a fetal position on the ground just because he's exhausted. I mean, he just essentially just swam dead weight of me and a shark.
Craig's dad and the other man pulled Craig up onto the beach. Luckily, there was a group of nurses on the beach that went into action mode.
I remember some women put pressing on my leg, which I didn't feel anything other than the shock sensation up until then. Once someone started putting pressure on my leg, that was really excruciating pain.
And what is the state of your leg at this point?
So it didn't touch the bone. So my bone, I didn't have any fractures or breaks in bones from the shark itself. The nurses there, they were just on vacation, but they put a tourniquet on my leg. They saw that I'm sure it was squirting blood when they were switching off holding pressure, but they did that. They did what they were supposed to do. They were the ones that kept me from bleeding out. When I look back and say, how did I survive that day? Clearly a lot of people helped me. I mean, it started with my brother because I wouldn't have made it back to the shore without him, but they held pressure. They stopped me from bleeding out to death right then. At that time, I didn't see my wounds.
Okay.
The only wounds I saw was my hands. So I'm on my back. I am gasping for air. At the time, I didn't know that I was bleeding to death, and I was just losing all that oxygen. So I'm just panting. I can barely breathe. My mom and dad are to my head. They're noticeably upset, crying and everything.
And are you thinking I'm dead, or what's going through your mind?
I've had very minor injuries. I've had broken bones growing up. I've had my teeth knocked out, whatever. But at that moment, I was never thinking holy crap, this is something that I may die from. At that moment, it was just too much going on. I'm lucky that this was not in a time of social media, because I don't know how I would like it if there were people that were just TikToking this. I don't know if I would be able to cope with what happened if I actually saw footage of that. I don't know how it would react.
On the Visit Florida website, Cape San Blas is described as a secluded piece of paradise, which is lovely until you need a level 1 trauma center to treat your shark bites.
So the ambulance got there quickly. There wasn't a hospital that's a level 1 trauma center anywhere near there. Panama City was the closest. I think it was probably 50 or 100. It's one of these 50 or 100 miles from Panama City.
It's 50.
They were going to lifeline me. So I'm in the ambulance. I'm waiting on the helicopter. And the helicopter was supposed to get there in 5 minutes. So the people at the ambulance and other bystanders were to my parents, you should go ahead and drive to Panama City because the helicopter is not going to be able to take you. And it's like an hour drive. So you should go so you can get there. And so they take off, and helicopter's supposed to get there in 5 minutes. Well, 45 minutes later, it finally shows up. During this time, I'm starting to get sleepy. I remember, like, you know, I was getting sleepy, but my best friend growing up had like 6 concussions throughout the years while we were playing sports. And so I remember after every concussion, like they always told us to, hey, don't let him go to sleep, keep him awake. Like, okay, I just need to stay awake. Like they told me not to let my friend go to sleep, so I'm not going to sleep. So the helicopter shows up. By this time, I'm sure they're giving me medicine, which is probably why I'm sleepy. But I remember this helicopter is just like really tight space. I'm strapped into a board. All I remember at that point was I asked them if it was okay if I go to sleep, and they said yeah. And so at that point, I went to sleep. They fly me to Panama City. I get to Panama City at the same time my parents are arriving, so they actually like timed it pretty well with the delay of the helicopter. They rushed me immediately to surgery. My parents, I don't think really understood the severity of the situation either, even being there watching, witnessing it. Because my mom recounts that she's sitting there and is like, oh my gosh, is he going to be able to play basketball next month?
Doctors came in and broke the news that no, Craig would not be playing basketball anytime soon. While in surgery, Craig's doctors made the life-saving decision to amputate his leg.
And, she has no idea until the surgeon comes out that, like, they didn't even come in to ask them what to do. It was, life over limb at that point. There was not any option. But it didn't touch the bone. Again, this was a bull shark, come to find out. And so when it was basically just too much tissue damage. And so when it bit me, one of the probably first bites was it bit my femoral artery. And so early on, I was just pumping blood out from this tear. And so there was just too much tissue damage and not any options. So, they tell my parents what's going on. They had to amputate my leg. I wake up and I would take this back tomorrow if I could, or today if I could. But my mom's beside me, and I look to my mom and I say, Mom, please don't let them take my leg.
But they already had. And Craig's mom just couldn't bring herself to tell him.
And I really shouldn't have said that because I knew. I'm laying on my back and I'm not able to sit up and look down and see what they did. I knew, but I shouldn't have asked that. She breaks down. She doesn't know what to say to me, and so she just stands up and walks out. And so we're Catholic, and so the priest from one of the local churches are there, and she has him come in to tell me what's going on. And it's what you would expect. I think how I took it. I think initially I'm sitting there thinking that I'm 16. I play 3 sports. I hang out with my friends. I like to go dating and everything. And I'm like, oh, that's just ruined at that point. And so I would totally say that for at least the first week, I was probably not fun to be around. Brian would probably tell you that in a very nice way. But I would say, of course, I was depressed, if that's what you want to call it. I was mad. I was wondering, why? What did I do in my life to deserve this?
On top of that, during the first week in the hospital, Craig was having a surgery every other day.
So I had the big surgery. They let me recover the next day. And then the next day, I probably had a debridement on my leg because the shark, infection. So they initially amputated, and then they have to take off a little bit more to debride what this tissue that could be infected. So they do that. There's a hand surgeon that's there that, my longest surgery was I think it was a 14-hour surgery, and that was on my hands.
And during all this, Craig had a very big question that just wasn't being answered.
This whole time, I would still ask every new healthcare person that walked in the door if I was going to survive. I would ask that multiple times to multiple people every day. because I never once got an answer of someone like, yeah, you're going to live. Not once. And that's what I think freaked me out the most, because early on, I get it. Like, they had no idea. Like, they had no idea I was going to survive the surgery. I lost all this blood. Like, what kind of brain damage I'm going to have? That was the big question. They didn't know if I was going to have my left hand amputated, because that was that was the worst of them.
To add insult to injury, Craig celebrated his 17th birthday in the Panama City Hospital. But some familiar faces came down from Tennessee to celebrate with him.
I was very thankful that they did that. That means a lot, absolutely. But my birthday, I know I wasn't fun to be around. I remember whatever, people were getting me gifts, and I wasn't happy. Finally, Brian, my brother, was like, you need to suck it up, is what he said, and quit being a baby in the nicest way. From there, he's right. Like, what happened happened. I think, after a week or two, by no means did I accept it 100%. I think it just was like starting the process of like, gaining perspective that I can't change this situation, and that I can, go this road and try to improve my life in other ways, or I could go down this road and maybe get into addiction and sulking and being depressed and like feeling sorry for myself, I guess. So I think after my birthday, and after he was like, people drove 8 hours just to come see you and say happy birthday, and like, you're treating them like this, like, you need to step your game up a little bit. So I think that was kind of a turning point. But it really didn't help, though, that his birthday gift to me was a game. It was like a Game Boy. And again, I can't use my hands, couldn't, like, bandaged up, and that's the gift he gives me. I'm like, that's not tasteful, bro. Not tasteful.
Did he open it and play with it?
Oh, he did. Yeah, he did. I guarantee he probably got it so he could play with it.
But there was a storm a-brewing. Literally. Hurricane Dennis was heading right to the Panhandle, so they transferred Craig to Vanderbilt University Medical Center, close to Craig's home. After he got to Vanderbilt, the surgeries continued.
At Vanderbilt, I think maybe I had 2 or 3 more surgeries, with the final one being like a skin graft that they put on the bottom of my residual limb.
What is the pain like?
I really was never in pain, fortunately. I had a PCA pump, so where you had a button that you can press. You're not supposed to have that on people that can't press the button. So I couldn't press the button because my hands were bandaged up. But my mom had access to this, and I think she was pressing that like no other.
A Jeopardy buzzer. Yeah,
and so I do have certain instances during the hospital, really painful events but that's kind of interesting. Like, outside of someone putting pressure on your leg of like an exposed artery, like that hurt. But I would say the worst sensation that I had outside of that was after they had to take the donor site for my skin graft came from my left thigh. And so after they took the donor site on my left thigh, they put like this yellow gauze type stuff over the wound. And then they wrapped my leg in like this saran wrap kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so when the time came days later to take off this dressing, that saran wrap went from my kneecap up into the top of my groin. And that saran wrap was like the stickiest tape that you can think of. And they had to take that off. And so every single hair that is from like your groin all the way down to the most sensitive part behind your kneecap, every little thing, like they had to do this. And it was literally my like leg was bare afterwards. And I was screaming. I mean, I'm telling you, I was screaming in the hospital because they were like every so often, they were just rip. And it was just pulling every single hair. That was by far, I would rather get attacked by a shark again than have to
get your legs waxed.
I was like, I don't know how people do that. It was awful. So, yeah, getting my leg waxed was
And the skin graft itself was fine.
Oh, it was fine. This was just like them just, and I think it was the manner in which she was doing it. She was only kind of going just a centimeter at a time.
There was a small upside to being attacked by a shark.
Oh, I was famous for a few minutes. You know, Inside Edition, Prime Time, Good Morning America. Uh, we really, and if only she would. I hope she listens to this. I don't know what your bandwidth of listeners are, but you know, we waited for so long for Oprah to call and want to do a show on me because I'm like, she didn't grow up, but she lived in Tennessee. I'm like, hey, come on. But then we were hoping for it, and then Tyra Banks called, and Tyra's, you know, this was when she was doing her show, and it was like, they're competitors. So, but Tyra offered, and Oprah hadn't, so we succumbed, and we went on Tyra Banks' show. That was a really cool experience, but yeah, it was fun. I mean, it definitely opened me out of my shell a little bit. Like now to this day, like if there's a camera in front of me, like I'm not as, I guess, embarrassed for myself.
Did all the media stuff get old?
Yeah, early on it did, because my dad really forced me to do a lot of this stuff. And so he was really on the mindset of like, oh, you went through this tragic accident, you can help a lot of people by telling them the story. The most uncomfortable of them was like when schools or other places that had people my age, like my peers, that I had to talk to and share my experience with, because I'm like, I have no life experience. Like, what am I telling? Like, nobody cares about, like, or at least that's what I thought. No one cares about that. Like, I'm not helping anybody. But yeah, it was interesting because, you know, small town Lebanon, I could probably go back to today and walk in the grocery store, and I guarantee you multiple people would like recognize me to this day.
After a few more surgeries at Vanderbilt, Craig got a surprise from one of his doctors.
The general surgeon or whoever was the attending on my case, I think his last name was Green. He basically said that I need to be discharged. And I'm like, I still have staples, I still have sutures, I'm still like bandaged that they're having to change 3 or 4 times a day. I still got a lot of stuff going on, but he realized like I'm not getting any better in the hospital because I'm an active person, and he realized that like you need to be in your home environment. So they were able to set up with like home health. And during this time I was going through hand therapy, which, you know, getting fitted for a prosthetic, doing all that was on the back burner. Mm-hmm. Losing a leg from all this sucks. I think equally as bad in my situation was the inability to use my hands. And for that time, I had to have my mom and dad feed me, pull down my pants, wipe my bottom. They had to do everything. And I feel bad for my wife now because she knows my wishes in terms of like how aggressive like medical care and like what I want for a quality of life to me is vastly different now compared to what probably
I'm sure.
Because I think that would be torture is if I am ever in that situation again where like I am not independent to at least like take care of my basic needs. And so that was really tough, especially with me being 16 years old.
Yeah.
And so they did it. And, you know, you can imagine as a parent, what they probably go through, what they went through, and how they feel today. I think my dad would, I think he would deny it to this day, but I don't believe that my dad thinks I can do anything for myself, even now. Like, I think he still lives in this time of 2005 where I'm like helpless and I'm like needing all this help all the time. And I think I think unofficially that was maybe a reason why I moved from Nashville out to Oregon. I always wanted to get away, but also like live near, you know, my parents who think that I'm just incapable of doing anything for myself anymore.
Have you talked to them about how this was for them?
I think I have. I don't know if I've ever got like in a like room sit down, like a serious like intervention style sit down discussion with them about it. I know that my dad and I we really argued, and this was probably like early 20s. And then as I got older, I think I forgave him for treating me like that. And so we're totally cool now. I don't know if I ever sat down and actually like talked with them about it. I don't.
Yeah.
My dad's kind of in his older age is getting a little bit more emotional. I don't know if he would want to go through all that again.
But before he came to terms with his relationship with his parents, Craig had to tackle a different beast: high school.
So our school did a year-round kind of thing where we did 9 weeks of school and then 2-week break, 9 weeks and then 2 weeks. And so our school started July 27th. And I think I went to school, I think it was exactly a month after my attack. Again, I'm like, hands are bandaged, I like don't have a leg, and but I just like, they knew that I wanted, and I had a friend, I was in a wheelchair, so like my friends like pushed me around. This is like junior year of high school, so like I remember my junior year was supposed to be the hardest year, like with academics.
Luckily for Craig, his best friend's mom worked at the school. She pulled a few strings and got Craig transferred to all his friends' classes.
They get my whole schedule with all the credits that I need to be my friend's schedule, who his junior year is going to be his easiest year of his 4-year high school. So for however, I got all my credits that I needed without doing stuff, but I got my schedule switched over to my best friends. This guy that had concussion. So his name's John Austin. So like John Austin was able to push me in my wheelchair, and we pretty much just hung out in the hallway and hung out with our friends. And then they let us show up a little bit after the bell rang, and they let us leave a little bit before the bell rang. And so our whole junior year it got like progressively longer and longer, me showing up to class and leaving early, that we like by the end of the year, I don't think we went to class. But no, it's kind of funny. Like at this point, you're a little local celebrity, and get a little bit more special treatment. And I'm not gonna lie, like, of course I'm gonna milk that a little bit if I can. If you're gonna give me this handout, sure, I'll take it. But I remember I was just trying to get back to being a normal person at that point. And I was embarrassed, of course, because like, again, I'm 16 years old and I don't have a leg now, and I can't do anything. But that was hard for me to accept. And I think over time, time helped, but I realized like, I can't go back to play basketball like I used to, as much as I want to. I'm sure that, early on I had a goal, that my goal was to play on senior night, like dress out and have one of the running prosthetics and play.
Yeah.
I thought initially that's what I wanted. And then I realized like, I'm not someone that like wants to be for show and like have like cameras on me and stuff. And I knew that would have been a publicity stunt. And I'm like, I would have never been in a competitive level. Like it would have been like, oh, let's get this guy to catch the ball and shoot the ball and smile and take a photo. I realized that that's how it was going to be. And that's not what I want. But I knew that like, hey, I'm not going to be able to get back to that point in terms of athletics like I used to. It was kind of sports, and it was dating girls. That was my focus, at that point in my life.
Being like a little celebrity. What, didn't girls talk to you? Like, are you okay? Can I push your wheelchair?
They would do that if there were cameras around. So you tell who's your real good friends when the cameras aren't around. But yeah, people would do that. Like people would be thirsty like that, but I think as time went on, I realized that like, if I talked to someone that had an issue with it, that's something that really I should not be with to begin with. And that was pretty easy for me to accept at that point.
As time went on, Craig's hands started to heal, and he went from the wheelchair to an upright walker to crutches.
By the time my hands started getting strong enough to be able to use crutches, I was starting to have enough healing in my leg to start being fitted, which getting fitted for a prosthetic leg, that took a really long time just because of my metabolism was so high at that point. I was still growing, and then I'd had so much, like with that trauma, I had a lot of fluid shifts in my leg. And so, getting it down to the point of like being able to have one prosthetic or one like fitting took like a year, maybe 2 years, to kind of go through different sockets and different fittings and stuff. So that process, it took quite a while.
Paralympic triathlete Sarah Reinertsen and actor John Siciliano, both above-the-knee amputees, heard about Craig's story and paid him a visit.
They were both similar situations where they were, active, had these accidents, and they remained active afterwards. And I didn't know anything about that. And I felt like my whole life was ruined after this in terms of sporting. And so they talked to me about this foundation called the Challenged Athletes Foundation that does sporting events, and every year do this half Ironman triathlon challenge in San Diego. And that they recommend that I go out there to check it out. And I was like, yeah, that'd be sweet, because you can separate the legs and have, one person do the swimming, one person do the biking and running. And so I'm like, well, that's great, because Brian was always a runner. So he ran the Boston Marathon all the time. That's what he does. Zachary started getting into road biking. I was like, perfect. And I hate swimming, but whatever, I'll do swimming, because that's the only thing that I thought I could do. And
it's in the ocean.
It's in the ocean. And it's the first time I'd be back in the ocean. I'm like, hey, look, whatever. It's, different species of sharks here. Okay, guys? It's going to be a great white shark. I'm not going to have a fighting chance out here. If it happens up there, I'm done. And so,
but it wasn't let's make him face his fears of the water. No, it was just default.
I did the swimming because I thought that was the easiest part. I'm not going to do a bike. I'm not definitely going to run. So I thought the swimming would be the easiest. And I just happened to be back in the ocean. But I'm like, different species of shark. There's going to be hundreds of other people around me. It's very low chance. And then so I say that in an interview. And of course, people online, they know everything. And so one of the immediate next comment, because I make the comment, I'm like, what are the chances of me getting attacked by a shark again? And the very first comment was it's exactly the same, dumbass. All right, thanks. So, but I've come to learn, or I tell myself that if I ever got attacked by a shark again, I'm okay with it. That is God's way of telling me that I'm just not supposed to be on this earth at this time. I accept it. I'm fine with it. The chances of that happening, again, yes, they're exactly the same. They're low. So that's what I tell myself. I thought it was going to be the easiest part. The swimming portion was 1.2 miles swim. It was like a half Ironman. I didn't really understand. I'm 17 years old, whatever. I thought that I could just do this and say that I trained. And I did, whatever. I trained in a pool, completely different than swimming in an ocean when I come to find out. I get up to training, I could swim a mile in a pool. And that's where I cut myself off. And I'm like, I'm going to go on adrenaline on the day of and and finish the 0.2 on adrenaline. And so, again, I've never done a triathlon. So when the day comes, I get in the water and I'm I immediately start I'm keeping it together, but I'm freaking out because I'm in this water that you can't see that much. And so as soon as the horn blows, I take off. And I'm again, I never have done this before. The most amateur person out there that should not be swimming. So I'm do exactly what you're not supposed to do. And I take off. And I think I lead the group for about 5 minutes, really far out there. And then immediately I'm exhausted before even making the first turn. And so it was a struggle to do the 1.2 miles, but we got it done. I didn't get attacked by a shark again. I was sore for the next 2 weeks, and that was it.
How did you guys do as a team?
Zachary didn't do bad. So I don't know what a good time is.
I have no concept of how long it would take.
Exactly. I don't either. It took me 45 minutes to do 1.2 miles. I didn't come in last. I came in I think I came in mid-group. I think Zachary did. He did within a realm of a normal person trying to compete in a triathlon. And then Brian, who you would expect, he should be the one to, be the best.
Yeah, he's just running Boston Marathon like it's nothing.
No, he did the worst of the bunch. Of course, I'm not going to say anything to him. Whatever. Our goal was to finish, and that's what we did. Kind of embarrassing if you ask me, but...
Craig made it through the rest of high school, and while he was in college, He started working with Vanderbilt mechanical engineering professor Michael Goldfarb to test a new robotic leg.
And the idea behind their prosthesis was that it offered power at the knee and the ankle. And so prosthetics nowadays, like on the market, they're passive. So like they don't provide power when you walk. At Vanderbilt knee, they had motors in it. So when you're like taking a step, these motors would activate the foot. So it would lift the foot. So it would act like a calf muscle. And then walking up a 5-degree incline was really cool to work with it because it provided power. So like right now with my leg, when I'm walking up an incline, like my normal leg is doing all this work and I'm just like dragging this leg behind me. But their leg, like whatever, it provided power. Their knee though, and their whole leg weighed maybe 15 pounds total compared to what I wear right now is about 6.5 pounds. And so the batteries on these motors, they're these lithium batteries. I don't think the technology is there yet to have the capacity into a smaller amount of weight. So like the batteries on this knee was what had all the weight.
Yeah.
So it was a great knee. It was just 2 times too heavy.
His experience that day on the beach and the quick, life-saving response of the vacationing nurses inspired Craig's career path.
So I thought I was going to go into like computer science or something like that in college. But after this, I realized like nurses saved my life and I just felt that I had to give back in some way. So went that route, got out of school, hated nursing.
What kind of, where were you nursing at that point?
Yeah, so I got out of school and got a job at the local hospital. So I'm living at home. I'm working at this local hospital that is like behind the times. That's where I'll leave it. And so it was, the orientation and the way they onboarded me, I went from like not knowing anything to them like putting me in these roles and responsibilities that were completely unsafe, that I'm just like kind of in there faking it till I make it kind of situation. And
that's not what one should be doing in that situation.
It got to the point like I was dreading going to work. And so then I saw that the Vanderbilt program had a nurse practitioner program that you had to just work for a year and then you can apply for that. And so I applied for that as early as I could and fortunately got accepted. And so I got out of my master's, and one of my professors, he's already had his PhD, so he was kind of taking me under his wing a little bit, and we were involved in a couple of research projects together. And so he gets offered this director position in Portland, Oregon at the academic hospital. And he was like, hey, there's a position open in the neuro ICU there on the ICU team. You should apply for it. And I'm like, all right. So I just randomly applied and they flew me out here and offered me a job. And I was like, all right, sure. Like, why not? And so I moved out here to just live here for a year. And then I met my wife here. It's history.
Being in Portland, Oregon, it's closer for Craig's young family to vacation in the clear blue waters of Hawaii than the Gulf of Mexico. And with the 20th anniversary of the attack coming up in 2025, Craig's wife is already planning a celebration.
My wife every year does the Sharkiversary for me. And, I tell her it just reminds me of the worst day of my life. But it's all fun and games. Like, I don't have PTSD or anything from it, unfortunately.
What have past Sharkiversaries entailed?
Typically, she'll throw a party with a lot of our neighbors and friends. Last year, she got me a shark blow up. So we have for Halloween decorations, we have like a shark riding a pumpkin and whatever. And so she got me a Christmas where it's Santa riding a shark blow up. And so she got me that. But it's just like a house party we have every year.
Yeah. Well, that's fun. You make
whatever.
something
It's
fun out of it, I guess.
Something to celebrate. Like all things considering what happened that day, I probably shouldn't have been here, but something to celebrate.
This is Live to Tell. I'm Caitlin Van Mall. You can follow the show on Instagram and TikTok at Live to Tell Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps the show. I'll see you in 2 weeks.